Traversez le rond-point. Deuxième sortie, P915.
I am not a scientist, nor an explorer, but a man on a journey. In 2006, my first trip to the Arctic created a breach in my experience of the world, as if a blank white page was needed so that my story would continue to write itself. Since that initial shock, my readings on the Inuit people have given new life to my own silent communion with the North. It is through the works of Jean Mallary that I developed a longing to meet its people. Over my next 2 visits, moved by the primal beauty and immensity of the North, I was confronted by a feeling of withdrawing within myself. This compelled me to reach out further to the people who had so touched me in my readings. It takes a lot of time and a good deal of change both within and outside of ourselves before we can begin to follow the right path. Soon, I'll be returning to the Arctic. I hope to echo the presence of these people of the North and offer them a space where their singular intelligence can take its unique place in our history. The French explorer, ethnologist, and Arctic specialist Jean Mallary is one of the Inuits' earliest defenders and will be my spiritual guide on this 4th journey. It is through my encounter with this great humanist that this adventure begins.
Nous allons nous entretenir des Inuits, c'est 60 ans de ma vie. En fait, c'est toute ma vie. Nous sommes d'une ignorance absolue sur les peuples premiers. À travers les Inuits, c'est tous les peuples premiers. On commence à les découvrir. Ce peuple sur lequel vous m'interrogez ne peut être compris que si on remonte toujours à l'amont. C'est les origines qui constituent leur loi. Ils ne sont pas sur la terre, ils sont dans la terre. Ils sont une partie de la pierre, ils sont une partie des animaux, ils sont une partie du vent. Ils sont très humbles vis-à-vis de cette nature.
The fulfillment of a very old dream is the resolution of a child's wild expectations. It may also be the beginning of a man's accomplishment. The voyage I'm about to make will be different from my previous ones. Thanks to this film, I will be able to contribute to giving a voice and a face to the Inuits' current reality. I am passing from contemplation into action.
Do you go for a long time? Do you go for a long time?
We're gonna come back tomorrow.
Ah, tomorrow.
Yeah.
Tomorrow. And what are you doing during the weekend? Fishing?
Fishing,
Fishing. And perhaps hunting?
looking for polar bear while they're fishing.
Mm-hmm.
Here in Saxe Harbor, a small Inuit village, hunting and fishing is passed down from father to son and daughter. Saxe Harbor is at the heart of the Arctic Circle on Banks Island in the Beaufort Sea. At the western extremity of the Canadian archipelago in the Northwest Territories, this tiny community of less than 120 people occupies a territory 1.5 times the size of Switzerland, where we are a population of 8 million. This unique place, 2 hours' flight from civilization, blurs all my bearings.
When we were growing up, we lived off the land. We never had any electricity, no phones. We used to have planes once a month, and just to bring the staples here. Best memories is when we go out in springtime. That's one time a year that the whole family travels. We used to travel with dog team, and we used to go to the lakes and go hunting and go fishing and then go hunting geese. Our springtime was the best time of year for everybody, and even today, that's the best time of year for all the families. Nowadays, it's really different, like, you know, in regards to how we used to live and how we're going to live in the future. Now we can't even travel very much because of the wind, constant wind. We have no idea what will happen on this land because of climate change. We have to adjust our whole lifestyle. We have to learn to live off the land in different ways.
There's Nellie Cournoyer. This woman is a pillar of modern Inuit history. Having led a semi-nomadic childhood moving between her Sami father, a Norwegian trapper, and her Inuit Inupiaq mother, she witnessed firsthand the suffering and aspirations of her people. As early as 1960, she participated in actions leading to the signing of the Inuvialuit Final Agreement in 1984, which would settle the land claims of Western Canada's Inuit. The first woman to be elected Premier of the Northwest Territories in 1991, Nellie Cournoyer embodies the very development that she has centered around her people. Here, everyone knows Nellie.
In trying to look at the effect of change and adaptation to change, this has been going on for 1800s during the whaling days, and what type of adaptation that we would have to embark on to survive. People also were excited about some of the changes that were taking place, but they would have preferred to be in more of a control of those changes and how they were done. They were trying to get the best out of both worlds.
Oh, yes, but I am not sure. I never. It's a wonderful story.
We had so many white foxes a couple of years ago in the fall time. Like, there'd be 40, 50 foxes around the house, just in the morning.
When?
This was a couple of years ago.
A couple of years ago?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
There was so much foxes on this island. Like, they were all over the place.
Sachs Harbor is a very unique place. It's out of the way, you know, and at the beginning families went up there on their own. It was not a government-funded program. It was a trapping community to look for new harvesting grounds. They were amazing people. They all had their own schooners, and a lot of us who lived in the Delta, when they came into town in the summertime, we were all in awe of them, you know, because they were rich and they were well-organized people, you know, and they would run 200-mile fox lines, and, you know, and that was not a hardship for them. And they worked hard, and there was no facilities. They made that. And then later on, government went in to create more nicer living condition.
People were making money. They were even getting furniture from Seattle. Yeah. Tables, fancy cabinets and stuff like that. And, you know, they'd be having them in their log houses.
Mm-hmm.
It gives me hope to know right now the hunters are hunting the polar bears. And there's some people who are getting polar bears 10 plus feet. I mean, it gives me hope to know that these animals are still growing that large, that they're still able to survive. My generation still enjoys to be out on the land and still enjoys to harvest. We do have the meats that come from the south, you know, chicken and beef and pork chops and stuff like that, but we still prefer our own traditional food. And right now with my young growing family, we're trying to teach them what our parents taught us. Obviously, we don't live as close to the land as our parents did and our grandparents did, but still, we still like to go out and sustain ourselves through what God has given us, is animals that we can survive off of. I'd say 60% traditional and 40% on the land. We're extremely fortunate to be living so close to the land still. We have all of this open space and we really treasure it. It's ours, it's where we come from, it's what we grew up on. We really depend on it and we respect it.
Here I feel the silence. Their silence. The silence of the animals, the silence of the earth. Silence is not the opposite of speech, nor its shadow, but rather its light. If we do not respect their gift of silence, how will we make their voice resonate at the heart of our own world?
We hang it outside to freeze dry and let the elements clean it for us. I'd say a month sitting outside in the sun. Well, that bear I got maybe about a mile and a half from the harbor because of lack of ice. And they're just traveling the coast. I got this polar bear hide is to try to make extra money to support my family. Once it's dried, I'll either have a buyer or find a buyer on my own or send it to an auction. Well, from that bear, it's about an 8.5-foot bear, so I'm hoping to get at least $4,000, $4,500 for that hide. Up here, it's so harsh environment, you know, you need these animals to survive because we don't have anything else. So we respect this animal for giving his life to us. We do that to all animals.
Oh, they're back.
Oh,
My husband, John Keogh, he's traveled all over the world. He's went to Africa, Iceland, Russia, United States, a few other places in regards to the impacts of the changing climate on us natives.
I caught you some fish. I like hunting, you know, I live off the land. About 80% of my food is off the land. Well, talking to my elders, you know, and they started realizing back in the 80s that the climate was changing, you know. It's getting a lot warmer. The real first observation, I think, was in '92 when the El Nino, and it was quite mild that year. But now it's the permafrost that's coming down, and the ground being disturbed and more of the permafrost being exposed to the heat and the sun, the wind, you know. Now there's more rain and the sun is shining all the time, or warmer summers, earlier springs. And once this starts, I don't know what's going to stop it. Climate change is going to affect everything. It's going to affect your ecosystem. It's going to affect your animals. It's going to affect the way you live. It's going to affect the land, the water.
I am surprised by the important role of women here. Mary Simon is one of the inspiring voices of the North. The first Inuit woman to be named a Canadian ambassador, she is active both nationally and internationally. She negotiated the creation of a council composed of 8 countries, known today as the Arctic Council. Mary Simon has dedicated her life to the struggle for social justice, in particular for children and adolescents, and to preserving her people's language.
My father was the manager of the Hudson Bay fur trading post, and my mother was a unilingual Inuit. She didn't speak any English, and my father, who was from another part of Canada, was very fluent in our language, so we always spoke Inuktitut at home and lived a very traditional lifestyle. We hunted and fished and camped all the time when I was growing up. A wonderful way to raise your children, because we were taught everything about life.
The women here in the community took a big role in keeping the community together. That's how I saw it anyway. They were the ones that were always on the councils, in the gatherings. They were the ones that always spoke up. We learned that we had to be role models and leaders in our community in order to get anywhere, to make sure that our children grow up to be safe and have the education. That's one thing that they all, like a lot of parents tell them, is that they want the education for our children.
I really love Sax Harbor, and I really wanted to see what I can do for my people. So I teach Inuvialuktun as a second language. Our children love it. I mean, it comes natural to them. Now with newer generations coming around, they have a newfound desire to wanting to learn it. I want my language to stay alive. I don't ever want to see it die, because that's a part of our identity. If our language dies, then that means a part of us die. I believe that if we can document it enough and have it spoken more and more and learn more about it, then it'll stay alive.
My parents go to residential school too. And one thing they weren't allowed to do is they weren't allowed to talk their language. So my parents never spoke our language in front of us or taught us. Because they knew what happened if they spoke their language in residential school. And so it just got lost here. We're trying to get back in this community. It's hard. More of the kids in our community know a lot more words than I do because of school.
I have a white man tongue. It's hard to loosen my tongue like Inuvialuktun does. For me, language is so important too, because it tells you who you are. It makes you who you are.
In some areas, we feel like we do have the same rights as everybody else, like all non-Aboriginals. But we still do have some of the people that do come here that are very racist. Racism will never, ever go away. That's what my father was fighting for, is that we want to be treated the same as every other individual in Canada.
We are not First Nations people. We don't operate under the treaty. So therefore, many of the things that go to the status Indian people are very helpful to them. But when it comes to us, from our claim, we entirely look after ourselves. There isn't like government money that says, oh, here's your core money, and and then do what you have with your land claim money. We don't have that.
The Arctic appears like a mirror within which I discover the true face of the man that I am. A human being capable of seeing and of being seen from within his own primal solitude, his vulnerability, and his need for free and lasting connections. I take the risk of trusting this new way of seeing, which in turn is susceptible to touching others on a level where they too need to be seen. A quiet fervor emanates from those northern lands that contrasts with the apathy and defeatism that surround me here. Like Jean Malari, I feel a strong affinity with the inhabitants of the north. Could it be that I see in them the hidden roots of my own nature?
For the past 10 years, I think the ice has been getting a lot thinner. And it does affect us in many ways, like it makes it a lot harder for hunting. Living in the North, we have to deal with whatever's in front of us. And so we have to learn to cope with it. It is harder to predict the weather now, but now that we have modern technology, we use the internet to check the forecast and satellite imagery, check the ice conditions. I think we're beyond the point of no return. It's not just going to affect the North, it's going to affect the whole globe, or the rest of the Earth. It's going to be a big challenge.
Climate change issues do not evolve from the Arctic. The climate change in itself is from developing countries, that aren't controlling their emissions. We all know that. But as Inuvialuit, what can we do? Some of our members of our Inuvialuit Society do go and really do make an effort to talk to the international and national forums. They do really make an effort to go and give the message, that if there is a need for reversing what's happening today in climate change, they have to go to the right places to do it, and it's not here. It's not fair for the government of Canada or any other agency to ban the use of polar bears because of climate change, because what good is that going to do? Because that's not going to stop climate change.
The tougher part of climate change is nobody wants to commit to it. Not the government, Of course, the big oil companies are against it. Whenever it's brought up, it's like brushed away. Canada should have been one of the leaders on climate change, and we haven't heard nothing or seen nothing of it. It's a hot topic, no one really wants to deal with it.
Here, time expands infinitely. The Inuit are familiar with the feeling of primal unity in which time and space are intimately entwined. In communion with the elements, they have become the space in which they breathe. With climate change and the opening of the Northwest Passage, the space around them is fragmenting. The balance is broken, and the people of the Arctic are now confronted by deadlines and new choices. They have been thrust into our linear time, calculated, measured. Here, from this unique perspective, I learned to stay true to the expansiveness which has remained with me since my first trip. I learned to see, in a single glance, eternity and the extreme fragility of our time.
I've thought about the passage opening, and the things that come to my mind are different countries at war because of that place. And the rest of Canada just needs to know that we're up here and we do exist and we do live on the island and we do need protection.
At the beginning of the 20th century, many Inuit communities were forced by the Canadian government to move to isolated locations in the Arctic. Their sacrifice and their tenacity to withstand the challenges posed by such an inhospitable land has since contributed to the consolidation of Canadian sovereignty within this region. Today, the melting of the ice is accelerating, allowing ships to navigate in waters which until recently were blocked. Therefore, the control of the Northwest Passage has become a major high-stakes grab for power that many countries covet. The environmental impact of this new maritime route is especially critical with regards to the risk of oil spills. What will become of these northern peoples whose survival depends on the intimate connection they have with the land? Is Canada able to protect its Inuit citizens from these upheavals which imperil their experience of space and time, their way of being in the world?
There are human beings up here. Right now, with the major issues of what's happening in the world and nationally, we're very much in play. But we don't suffer under any illusion that anyone is really thinking about the people up here. It's the resources. It's what they want to do and what they want to get out of it. Sometimes you just feel that they're saying to themselves, what if these people weren't here, you know? It would be so much easier, you know? But the fact is that we do exist. And we've been here a long time, and we aren't going to go anywhere.
By refusing to betray their profound identity and abandon their dreams, lands, and rights to the businessmen of this world, the Inuit are, in a sense, pioneers of a new order. Multinationals are forced to sit with them to discuss and clarify the complex issues surrounding their development projects. In the face of such great turmoil, are we not obliged to listen closely to one another and arrive at a common agreement?
We have our environmental review processes, you know, that, and then we also have our wildlife measures. And those are measures that always have to be on the table when we're deciding, do we do this or do we do that, you know? And we're very clear about it. So we have comprehensive agreements with almost all the major oil companies and gas companies, and it's not, you know, like it's a process of how you do business up here.
The discussion going on right now about you know, the high level of resource development that could take place in the high Arctic brings a big question about what role are we playing in all of this, because even if we weren't involved, they would probably proceed. So the question becomes, how do we get involved and influence some of the development that takes place, not only for to make money. That's not the biggest concern. The biggest concern is work in partnership with developers so that we bring back something to our communities. Like, I'd like to set up an education fund as part of any agreement that takes place, because we need money for education. So these are some of the things that I think can help balance how we benefit from the development.
For me, I'm just hoping my children can survive in the modern world and still be able to go and practice our culture, because you need that to know who you are. If you don't practice your culture, for me, I believe you're lost. You're not a complete Southerner. You're not a real Eskimo, so you're stuck in between. I shouldn't say Eskimo, it's Inuvialuq.
This is my son, Stephen Lucas. He's 18 years old.
That's my dad, John Lucas Jr. He's 39 years old. Back in the day, they had it hard because they had to dog team around and, you know, ride like 13 hours a day on a dog sled, set traps for a living in meat. Nowadays, we got a snow machine. Sax Harbor taught me a lot of stuff in politics, a lot of hunting on the land, surviving, safety, work, taught me how to work, and taught me how to live. For me, the most important wish I could have right now is probably nothing, because I got everything I need up here, everything I want.
I enjoy remembering that moment of intimacy between Stephen and his father, John Lucas, as they sat bundled up warmly side by side in the intense cold, especially the young Inuit's astonishing remarks, so different from the prevailing pessimistic sentiment. The intergenerational ties forged in Sax Harbor, the patient presence of nature, and the desire to transmit and receive ancestral knowledge all inspire innovative responses to inevitable change. Unfortunately, this capacity to dream and to act remains fragile for a large number of young Inuit from other communities.
Sax Harbor, they've really worked hard to become a healthy community. And it may not be necessarily the exception, but it's probably in the top 10. We want to build healthy, sustainable communities where people are contributing to their own society as well as to the rest of Canada. We have a huge workforce up north. The population in the Arctic, the younger people, over 51% of the population is less than 25 years of age. So education is of utmost importance. The young people know that not only do they have to carry on, but they also have to be well educated to take on the responsibility of what we are doing today.
For my children, I want them to know who they are and where they come from and be proud of who they are. I want them to know that. But I also want them to know the outside world and get the best of both worlds.
John Lucas is a good example of the synergy that exists between the dream of the ancestors and modern aspirations.
They have a computer on a boat and they have a
John and his father form one of the best polar bear hunting teams in the world, while he manages the affairs of both the community and a major Arctic park.
Älvik National Park was established to preserve wildlife and protect the specific area from development. Well, the park is important for a lot of the research. We have lemming monitoring projects, we have permafrost monitoring, and snow depth measurements. So the park is very important to the community of Sachs Harbor. So we have a lot of consultation with local members, the government, environmental natural resources, and fisheries. It's very important for the government to get feedback from local like traditional knowledge and different projects. Polar bears, it's hard to say about polar bears. The last count they did, they said there's about 1,200 polar bears per region, so that's pretty healthy population here. For Sachs Harbor, we have a quota of 28 polar bears we can harvest each year. And this year will be pretty close to it. I think we got about 10 take left, so we never filled our quota for the last 25, 30 years. Like, we had a very successful year this year, so everybody's happy getting polar bears. There's no quota for wolves and no quota for foxes, but they both have seasonal dates. There's 36,000 muskox on the island, with plus or minus 4,000. For muskox, we can take 10,000, but annually we take 100 to 300 muskox a year, I think, from the community. That's a pretty good number. And there's about 1,250 peri caribou. Early 1980s, the caribou population was 12,000, so you do the math, like the muskox increase and the peri caribou decrease. Hopefully people will learn how to treat the environment better, like be more environmentally friendly.
The reason I went in politics, or what I'm working for right now, is to make sure that Sachs Harbor is not left out, even though because it's a small community. No? I need the signature. We want equal share of what we are entitled to. We all want to fight for our land and to make sure that it is there and safe and healthy for generations, for future use, for our children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren.
I do these for those elderly ladies, so I have to pack them up. They go to Sachs, to Holman. This shop here was set up to promote the arts and crafts of our beneficiaries.
As with all the inhabitants of the Sachs Harbor community, Donna Kiogak and Nellie Kanoye remind us that, on the social scale, everything counts. Caring for our loved ones, mobilizing for the common good, being concerned for future generations.
Looks like before you. But it's very warm.
Small gestures mingle with visions for the future. Politics and daily life converge.
There is no markup on any of the products that are here. We bring them in, and exactly what we pay for them is what they're sold for.
Too much TV, too much computer, and other distractions, like being occupied by something that's not real, I guess. You can't even communicate with the TV. That's the way of the world now, I guess. The way of, I guess, evolving. I guess everybody evolves for reasons I don't understand. I don't know where our future's going here. It's kind of sad. I'm just hoping we all can work together. And
the melting of the ice signals the loss of bearings, the melting of certainties. Lawrence Amos resists the end of the world. He is perhaps thinking about that which he feels is essential to protect, the cycle of the seasons, language, the necessities of daily life, silence.
Knowledge is power. It's not just money is power. Knowledge is power. And for me, the transfer of knowledge from our own people back to our own people is a very real strength that I think we should build upon. The concept is to work with the regions, and we help support their endeavors, their initiatives. So that Inuit become involved in research rather than being researched. Because years ago, the pattern was that the researchers and the professors would come into the Arctic and they would research the people, right? So we've tried to switch that around, and we're working on it. So what we're trying to do is that we're trying to set up our own system so that we start to involve Inuit, young Inuit people, to do research and work with researchers from the South so that there's a partnership, that not only should the scientific knowledge be taken into account, but it should also, the community and traditional knowledge or Inuit knowledge should also be taken into account.
Avec leur expérience, ils doivent être nos maîtres. C'est toute une révolution spirituelle. Nous avons à réapprendre que dans la nature, il y a une pensée. Il y a tout un ordre. En fait, la nature est divine. Donc, l'histoire de ce peuple premier qui entre avec difficulté dans le monde moderne est une histoire d'un peuple qui doit nous conduire. Il doit nous faire réfléchir. Les espaces blancs, c'est probablement les derniers espaces vierges de notre planète où nous avons à prouver que nous sommes capables de faire ce qu'on appelle le développement durable.
Life up in Sax Harbor is like life no other. I mean, people say, oh, you're so small town, you're so isolated, you're so far away, and I could never live there. But you know what? If you've grown up here, and if you've lived off the island, if you've lived in the community, if this place was your home at one time, it'll always be home.
Life sways between the extremes that manifest in the world. On the path unfolding before us, will we be able to walk side by side with a slower, lighter step, carried by the breath of the Arctic?